changes, additions, or deletions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we'll have the invocation and the pledge of allegiance. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for allowing us to be here and gather here today to do your will. We ask that you provide us, this board, with the knowledge, wisdom, and foresight to do what is right for the county and its citizens. Dear Lord, we also ask that you protect those that are in harm's way each and every day with our fire departments, our EMS providers, as well as our sheriff's department. We also ask that you protect those that are overseas, protecting our freedoms, dear Lord. And we ask all these things in your name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next we have citizen comments. Is there anyone wishing to speak under citizen comments? Hello, if you could just state your name and your area of residence, please.
I'd be happy to. My name is Skylar Zunk. Pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I'm not from here, from the Richmond area, but a pleasure to be back in Amherst County. I'm here today to introduce myself and a new nonprofit coalition that we just launched yesterday that we hope will have an active presence in Amherst and surrounding counties. We're calling this new group Energy Right. As you all know, the topic of clean energy development in rural areas is an increasing topic for boards and communities to deal with. We want to make sure with our organization that there's a conservative voice at the table present in all of these conversations, so that if clean energy is going to be coming to rural Virginia, we have conservative ideals helping to guide, shape these projects, and ultimately help counties as they're considering clean energy developers to be using local labor, local contracts, and making sure this is the best economic story possible for rural Virginia. So, like I said, we just launched yesterday. I don't have business cards yet to leave you all with, but I'd be happy to share an email with you all, just further introducing ourselves, our website, and some resources. Definitely, as a nonprofit, want to be a resource to community members and people who are considering clean energy policies in their own regions, but also want to be a resource to county and county staff. So thank you for hearing from me. Pleasure to be with you all.
Can you repeat your name and the name of the organization?
Yes, ma'am. My name is Skylar Zunk, SKYLERZUNK, and the name of the organization is Energy Right. Our website is www.energyrightva.com.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, appreciate it. Is there anyone else wishing to speak under citizen comments? If not, we'll go ahead and close citizen comments. Next, we have our first read ordinances. They're all with Mr. Bryant, so we'll let Mr. Bryant preface it, what we're going to be talking about today.
Okay, thank you. The first two ordinances are very closely related. Generally, what we're attempting to do is allow plating requirements for stormwater facilities, utilities and utility facilities, and cemetery lots. It offers flexibility to go where we can go beyond our minimum standards for lot area, lot width with those three uses. For example, we had a utility company come to us. They needed to build a utility hut in the agricultural district. We have an agricultural minimum lot size of an acre. And they said, we don't need an acre of land to build a utility facility. While we were into the weeds with that discussion, we also made sure we looked at other uses that we don't clearly address, such as stormwater facilities and cemetery lots. So we added standards for, we added a new section of the subdivision ordinance that deals with both utility, cemetery, and stormwater divisions and how we, and subdivision regulations. We go so far to even require a perpetual private cemetery maintenance agreement that would be reviewed by the county attorney as to form. So that ordinance is 0006, and then the next one, 009, I'm sorry to skip ahead, but they're closely related in how it was laid out, adds those use categories. Stormwater facilities, utility lots are actually already existing, and then cemetery regulations into each of those different zoning districts as use requirements. And then, if I may, and also in that second ordinance, which is labeled 0009, long discussion of the Planning Commission about architectural elevations, requiring architectural elevations. We have a definition of what that is, and a requirement when you're in the village district and a site plan comes through that we would require an architectural front elevation of buildings to come through. So staff would have more information when site plans came through, specifically in the village district. So I know we're talking about 0006, so any questions for me on that?
Mr. Martin?
Yep, two questions. So on the first one, I mentioned to Mr. Rogers, it looks like you had requirements for perpetual maintenance of the cemeteries, but what about the stormwater facility?
Yeah, really good question. So DEQ, since we allow DEQ to do our stormwater, anything over an acre, DEQ requires a perpetual stormwater maintenance agreement. The county requires it anything in between 10,000 square feet and 0.99 acres. We have a stormwater maintenance agreement that's signed by both the owner, the county, and the county attorney.
So what I would like to not see is lots created where no one's responsible for them.
Sure.
So you telling me that won't happen?
That's correct.
Okay. Then the second thing on the renderings, I think it's fine to require those. I don't think we can base decisions based on the appearance. Yet, I think it would be helpful in the definition if you added building materials and colors, just so we know what the building's actually being constructed of. That's just my thought.
That was that just under A or?
That was B.
B, okay.
The first
The
part was
elevation.
A, and the second part was under B.
Okay. All right. Does anyone have any other questions regarding, we'll go with ordinance 8. Anybody have any questions with that? All right, well, I will go ahead and move that the board direct staff to advertise ordinance number 2022-0006 for a public hearing at the August 16th meeting. A motion on the floor, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, next, ordinance 2022-0009. I know Mr. Bryant had talked about this. This is relating to elevation of buildings in the V1 district, is that correct? Okay.
That's part of it, and then the second part is the use categories, which were tied into that other ordinance.
All right. Are there any further questions regarding ordinance 2022-0009?
Mr. Chair, I would move that the board recommends ordinance number 2022-0009 with the addition of building materials and colors for a public hearing for the August 16th meeting.
Any further discussion? There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Martin. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, next is ordinance 2022-0010. Mr. Bryant.
So the next one mainly deals with how we regulate campgrounds. And the existing code says that in the agricultural district, you can camp for less than 4 consecutive weeks in a portable facility, a tent or camper. And then it references a section called 904, which is travel trailer parks, which essentially lends itself to campgrounds. So what we would like to do is be clear about it. And we would like to make sure that we can still allow camping for 4 consecutive weeks in the agricultural district, so we don't change that. But camping, or campgrounds, we're calling that out specifically, and we're changing the name travel trailer parks to campgrounds, and we believe they should be a special exception use in the agricultural district. Imagine single-family dwellings in an agricultural district with a campground beside it. Right now, it's a permitted use. And so we are recommending that we keep campgrounds as an allowable use, but only through a special exception process. So we could still approve at an administrative level when people have a camper on their property up to 4 consecutive weeks, And you may remember a few months ago, you approved a provision that if they had an active building permit, they could stay in it for up to a year. That's still in code, we're not changing that. What we're asking you to change is that campgrounds would actually be a special exception use in the agricultural district, not a permitted use the way it's written now.
So do you have a definition of campgrounds on here? That would be more than one, I would assume. That would be like a commercial campground or...
Yeah, exactly. I don't have that. That's in the definition. That should be in the definition
Recreational
section. I'm sorry, Mr. Pugh, I don't have that in front of me right now.
I'm just thinking about hunting season and people pulling, maybe a couple of different campers on a piece of property.
Well, and we look at that differently. So we're looking at when you establish a land use. So
Okay.
when someone comes in and they intend to apply to build and construct a campground, we don't feel like that should be a permitted use in the agricultural
Okay.
district. That should be a special exception use.
Okay.
Mr. Bryant, would this make any existing campgrounds non-conform?
It could make one existing non-conforming, but they could still expand up to 50%. And to my understanding, they don't have really any room to expand. So I don't think that would create any real problems.
I don't have a problem with this.
Sure.
I'd just look into that a little bit more detailed and maybe give them a call.
Okay.
I have a question. So camping is not supposed to be allowed in B2 areas or residential areas? We have campers in Madison Heights. I was just wondering.
Well, it's the act of camping, not just having a camper on your property.
Okay. All right. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion, board? If not, I entertain a motion.
I'll move that the board direct staff to advertise ordinance number 2022-0010 for a public hearing at the August 16th meeting.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Wade. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda, and that is the minutes, 2022 Personal Property Tax Relief Act and the Blue Ridge Regional Jail Authority. Are there any questions or anything that needs to be broken out of the consent agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
All right, there's a motion on the floor by Mr. Martin. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, next we have new business. We have the Virginia Fire Services Board Study. Mr. Sam Bryant, if you could come up for us. Hello.
Hey, hello. Good afternoon, Board. So this study was last done in 2013, and this is done by the Virginia Fire Services Board. It's at no cost to the locality. They come in, and a group of very experienced people look at our fire and EMS delivery of our systems, make recommendations, and it can happen in a period of 2 to 3 months, I understand. And speaking to Mr. Day, who's been part of this before, we don't have to put a lot of skin in the game. They'll look at all of our response times, our apparatus, our processes, where our stations are, the EMS side of it, and they make recommendations. They're just recommendations. So the last study was broken down into 5 different categories and recommendations: organizational development, communication, training, budget and administration, and delivery services. So you get a good broad view of your system, how it operates, and they make recommendations for your consideration.
Yeah, I had a question, but you answered it. I was like, when was the last study done? I believe I was on the board at that time.
I was on the board, yeah.
I can remember that being done. I didn't think it was that long ago. And this was,
14, is that right?
said 2013.
13?
Yeah, time flies. And this was asked for by the EMS Council, is that correct?
It was brought up by the EMS Council, EMS, Emergency Services Council, for your consideration.
All right. Board, are there any comments, questions? I know, I would have one. I know that Mr. Bryant will be stepping away pretty shortly, and I didn't know if it'd be worthwhile of us waiting to do this until we have a new public safety director in place. I think it would be good for whoever that might be to be involved in that somewhat. So that would be my recommendation, that we wait until we have a new public safety director.
If I may, when do they plan on starting this if we do approve?
You have to make the request, they look at it and figure out a timeline to the Fire Services Board. So getting your name in the hat earlier is better for consideration. You could make the request and withdraw it if you didn't want it, but it would be very helpful for our region to look at, what's needed, what we did from this study. I think very little was done from this study, unfortunately. I think there's some low-hanging fruit here still that we could all work on. It kind of brings the team together and gets them at the table to talk about some of the tougher topics, but it's very doable, and there's some magic things that happen with teamwork and collaboration. These are good guys that come in and do this study. They're friends, they're not foe. They're here to make recommendations and work with you. We take them around, let them meet the fire chiefs, the deputy fire chiefs, the EMS leaders, the captains in public safety, and they give you a broad view, and they do good work.
I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Mr. Waits. Once you put your name on the list, you say, yes, I'm interested, I'd like to do it. About how long does it take before you get to the top of the list?
I don't know. I know it's a 2 or 3 month process is what the former deputy director, Lee Day, told me this afternoon.
Thank you.
So you're welcome.
Yeah, I'm all for doing it.
So, yeah, I agree, we need to do one. I think you mentioned it, some of the things have been done. I think a lot of things have not.
Just, yeah.
I think the existing study also sends some mixed messages on different things, volunteer versus career, this and that.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be a great thing to update it.
Yeah.
So I agree with Mr. Pugh. I don't think it'll probably get started until after a new director's been put on board, because they probably, the other thing, I think whoever the county ends up hiring, they need to be able to come in and get a lay of the land before we move forward. But let's just put the request in and see what the time.
See where it goes. You have to agree with him showing up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a request.
Yeah, this is a request by the council, right,
Yes.
Ms. Bryant?
The Board of Supervisors has to make the request. And this is a request from the Emergency Services Council.
Right, that was my
And I've been sending information about this over the last year and a half or so to the chiefs and the captains, and it did come up at our last council meeting. I was the one that put it on the agenda, but I left it open for their discussion.
As far as I'm concerned, we make the request now, and I agree with all of you all, that the next director
Yeah.
should be intimately involved, but I think we can request.
Absolutely.
All right, well, it sounds like there's a motion on the floor by Ms. Tucker. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, next we have the generator reimbursement.
Yes, Station 3 is near completion. Manellis and Rescue spent almost $10,000, $9,478 on a generator for that station, so the EMS providers and the firemen could operate there 24/7 without power. And they bought it, but they're asking to be reimbursed. It runs the whole station. I bought the last equipment for that station yesterday, the lawnmower, the weeder, that kind of stuff, and the blinds, so we're ready. We hired 2 people last week. We hope to hire 3 people this week, and with 3 that'll come back, I'm really hoping that we have our billets filled before I get out of here with good people. But we're close to operating out of that station.
All right, any questions? Anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the reimbursement.
All right, there is a motion on the floor by Mr. Martin. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Bryant.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, next we have funding for a part-time seasonal park ranger. Mr. Randy Nixon, if you could come forward.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
As you know, we've made some new amenities out of Mill Creek Park with the beach area and our swing, and people are really enjoying it and loving it. And if you go out there, I've been out there several times, and sometimes it's pretty packed. So what we're asking for is, I believe, $8,500 for a seasonal part-time, basically a park attendant, someone that can be out there on site to be some eyes and ears, and also to help clean up trash, check the bathrooms. We've had issues with the bathroom because, we don't have water and electricity there, so those are, what we call privies. And so we've had some issues with those solar-powered bathrooms flushing properly and everything, getting clogged. So these folks could help, clean that and make sure those are working properly in the main parts of the day when most of the people are there. And also, just to kind of police it and make sure folks are following the rules and there's no issues and they can, contact the right, authorities or people that, if there is a problem. And we think we're trying to be proactive rather than reactive in this situation. So, and trying to be good neighbors to the folks out there too, to show that we want to make this right and make it a good, fun experience for everybody that takes part in it. So.
All right.
Yeah, I'm a cheerleader from Mill Creek Lake, and I like the idea. I was out there Sunday. We had friends in from Richmond for the weekend. Went there Sunday. It was pouring down the rain. You don't know what you're going to see.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you what, I was so proud to walk there. I saw one piece of trash, which I picked up. One. It was great. I like your idea, but I don't like the name. I don't like the name Ranger. I think it
Well, we're actually discussing making a park attendant.
is...
Park attendant.
It assumes something that it's not.
It's not, yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, we're looking at park attendant, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. What type of authority are they gonna have, if any? Are they gonna be able to write citations, or you just gotta call the police?
No, they're not going to, we don't want them to confront anybody. These are going to be possibly retired folks, or, we're not sure who we're going to be able to hire, but we want them to have, GED at least, and we've actually been working on just trying to get ahead of the game, trying to work on a little job description and basic duties and tasks. But yeah, they're basically there to be eyes and ears and to contact the proper authorities. Now, we'd like the right person to go up and say, hey, you can't, do that or whatever based on the rules without creating do it with a smile. Someone that's going to be there that can interact with people properly.
I've got a follow-up.
Mr. Chair, if I may address that one, they'll have a county
Yes.
T-shirt with logo on it. It'll say park attendant, and it'll give people someone to turn to if they have a complaint or they have a concern. They'll have someone there to express it to.
Exactly.
And this is just specifically for Mill Creek?
So
So
far,
we
yes.
can't utilize them down at the trail, Percival Island Extension, or anywhere down there?
We'll see how it goes. It's an experiment.
Yeah, it's a trial period. We're just seeing how it works.
Thank you.
Can you work with public safety, possibly get them a radio?
Yes, we can talk to them about that possibly. We've kind of thrown that around, because I know a lot of times the cell service doesn't work out there, so. Yeah.
All right. Well, I know there had been complaints of trash and other complaints, and that would be the primary, making sure the place is
Yes.
clean.
Yes.
So it's presentable.
Right.
So,
So, Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the transfer of $8,500 from the unobligated general fund transfer account to fund the trial use of part-time park attendants at Mill Creek Lake Park.
there's a motion on the floor by Mrs. Tucker. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Nixon.
Thank you.
I'm identifying.
Thank God. Next, we have, next we have old business. We've got the youth grant reports. Ms. McBride, I know that I'd asked about this the last time, and you have a report for us.
Yes, we have dispersed funds to 4 organizations, and that is all that have applied or qualified. We've given out all we can give, and the last check was picked up today. So we're done with that. I'll probably come back to you not next time, but probably within the next 2 months to look at where we're spent ARPA money, but maybe we didn't use everything you allocated to those areas. So there'll be $10,000 in this line that did not get spent,
All right.
because that was the max they could get.
Well, I appreciate it. I was just making sure that those funds got dispersed. I know that there had been a holdup on it, or people hadn't heard anything, so I appreciate y'all doing this and getting it done. I'm sure.
Yeah, somebody at ESP, because I had put it on my list literally that weekend, and the next day, everybody was asking, so.
I'm sure that, that they'll be happy with that, or they should be happy with it, and we appreciate you getting on the ball and doing that, so thank you.
Yep, it's done.
Mr. Chair, so for the public, can you just mention who received those grants?
Madison Heights Youth
Baseball.
Baseball,
Monellison Bruins.
Monellison Bruins, the Amherst Wolverines,
And the softball.
and the softball.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McBride, appreciate it. All right, next we have the transfer station report, Mr. Rogers.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. This report is given in response to questions from the board and questions from citizens as to the status of the transfer station. You have in your board package all of the transfer station documents, history, and minutes, about 600 pages worth, as well as a table of contents, a chronology listing where you might find each of those. And then I provided, I think it was a 2-page summary on where we are in an attempt to answer all the questions that had been given to us. I now just want to briefly go through the 9 questions I've listed on the cover sheet here for the agenda item and give you the short answer to all of those questions. Why did the county decide on a transfer station? If you'll recall, back in 2017, we obtained funding to refurbish all of the schools, the roofs, their lighting, their HVAC systems, and that included $4 million for the new cell of the landfill. As we spent that money and we're nearing the end of that contract for the schools, we decided to take a second look at the construction of another landfill cell, because we knew that we would be committing to not just 14 years of the life of that cell, but an additional 30 years of care of that cell after it had closed. So this was a long-term commitment. We wanted to make sure that we were doing that right. Began talking to the engineers and asking them the questions. So why did we decide, and eventually the board did decide to go with the transfer station after many years of studying, considering other alternatives. The reason we went with the transfer station is because over the 28-year study period where we compared transfer station with landfill, it was determined that the cost was $10 per ton less over the life of the transfer station, or the life of the landfill, the 28-year period. So over 28 years, it was simply cheaper to operate, and that didn't even get into the issues of liability and long-term care, which we know because we already have 2 landfills we're currently caring for long-term. And, with groundwater monitoring and leachate treatment and hauling, we know they have a long financial tail. And so it was simply cheaper to operate the transfer station. Number 2, when was the transfer station started? Construction began in January of 21. 3, why did we uncap the closed portion of the landfill? We uncapped the closed portion of the landfill to buy more time. We waited till the very last minute to undertake the contract to begin the transfer station with hopes that that Price could finish the construction by November of 21. Turns out they couldn't, and they didn't. It's just now finishing this month, and so it was good that we bought the extra time. The life of the landfill for a while began fluctuating. As people stayed home for COVID and emptied out their basements and garages, the landfill started filling up quicker, and now it's slowed down again. And we just weren't certain as to how long the landfill would last. So we simply purchased time. The other reason for opening the other cell, uncapping the existing cover, was to make full use of the landfill. So when you construct the landfill, the liner is constructed for a full mountain on top of it. And we're only building on half of it. So we were letting a lot of the liner go unused. And that's simply a waste of county funds, and it's cheaper to haul to our own landfill. So it was cheaper, it bought us more flexibility, and fortuitously now, serendipitously, the cost of fuel is so high, we're not in a position where we have to haul. And so it's because we went to the trouble to get it uncapped, and we did that. The expense that it cost, the engineering studies, we did the work ourselves, but the engineering studies came out of the landfill budget. So yeah, it cost money to uncap it, but all those funds were within the existing landfill budget, and that's why we didn't come to the board and ask for additional funding to do that. Number 4, why does the county plan to use the landfill until the end of 2024? Well, we don't plan to use it till the end of 2024. We plan to use it until it's full. We don't know when it'll be full. The board has never set a deadline on when to close the landfill or a start date for the transfer station. The whole point of having these two facilities available is that as the landfill becomes full, the transfer station will be ready to operate. And so we are now in that position. The transfer station will be ready to operate here by the end of the month, and we'll begin hauling our own trash. And we're going to haul it a quarter mile to the top of our landfill. And we're going to keep hauling it there until the landfill gets the right shape to be properly capped and with an impermeable layer, and then 2 feet of soil on top of that, and we'll do all that work ourselves. And when that will occur? Well, when it occurs. And until then, we'll save money by hauling to our own landfill. It's also fortunate that should there need to be any demolition work at CVTC, there will be a nearby landfill to accept that. And that will, of course, shorten the life of the landfill, but decrease the cost of development for CVTC. Who made the decision to uncap the landfill? I did. I am authorized, directed by you all. I hold the authority to operate the landfill. You expect me to operate the landfill. You've given me a budget to operate the landfill, and I have done that. I've kept you informed with regard to our plans initially when we began discussing whether to uncap it or not. We informed you of that and all the stages along the way. I have not asked for additional money, and so you have not withheld authority from me to do that. This is simply me operating a facility that the county owns. And so it's wholly within my authority to do that, and I had your acquiescence all along the way. Did the county start uncapping process before obtaining DEQ approval? No. We've been working with DEQ from the start. What equipment was purchased? Well, we purchased a loader, which is a big bucket to push trash into the trailers. There are tractors. There are trailers with a walking floor to unload the trash. We've purchased compactors for the convenience centers. We purchased additional cans that we can place out in the community. The list of all of our purchases was approved by the board in detail at the 6 October 20 meeting. And just a reminder, I mean, our original loan was for $4 million. When we refinanced that loan to buy us more time and get a lower interest rate and get a lower payment, the board decided to increase that $4 million to $6 million. And with that additional money, that's how we improved and expanded the existing convenience centers with compactors and additional cans and so forth. How is everything funded? The VRA bond for $6 million. And when do we anticipate hauling trash? Hopefully by the end of the month. And we'll be hauling it to the top of our own landfill until it's full. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm sure we have some questions. One of the things that I saw that I was not privy of was there was a PowerPoint presentation dated June 1st, 2020. And the title, excuse me. And the title of that was, "Why should we uncap the landfill? Why should Amherst County uncap the landfill?" June 1st, 2020. Now, I don't think any of us on this board ever saw that. I don't think any of us saw that. And I think there was staff was present, you were present. This was about 3.5 months after, I believe, this board made the decision to go with a transfer station. So 3.5 months after the decision was made, you had come back to your staff and decided that it was better for us to haul the trash, reopen the landfill and just take it to the landfill? According to this, it would save you about $1 million over 70 months. Is that correct?
I don't have that in front of me.
All right, well, that's what it says. It'd be about $1
Okay.
million savings. And this was just 3 months after we made that decision. And so, to me, I mean, there's more that I could get into, but it was kind of like, what? We voted to do that, and then 3.5 months later, we decided we're gonna go ahead and keep the landfill operating. It'll give us another 70 months to save the county $1 million. Well, that's good news. I'm glad we saved money. But if you look back at it, well, maybe the decision was not a good decision to build the transfer station when now we've seen the cost to haul trash has become astronomical with the price of diesel. The tonnage that was used in the Draper-Aden study was significantly increased in the June. I mean, here it is right here. I'll show you, but let me see if I can find it. Here it is, Amherst County landfill. You know, anyway, the tonnage was increased. All these different things were increased at this June 1st, 2020 meeting. And I just think it would have been valuable for this board to be able to see that information as to why this decision was made. And I'm somewhat distraught by it because it almost makes you seem as if it would have been a better idea. Regardless, DEQ understand that, the long-term obligations of the landfill, we're still having to do that. But you're saving $1 million a year over 70 months, you extrapolate that out, that saves this county a lot of money. And at this point in time, I know hindsight's 2020, we are looking at a huge hole by building the transfer station, at least in my opinion. And I have a hard time answering questions to people when they raise them about the landfill.
Okay, to address that. Of course, you make decisions. When you make a decision, you're making it with the information that you have at the time. When the board made this decision to go forward with the transfer station, it was with the understanding that the landfill was going to be full and needed to be replaced by November of '21. Okay? So, and it took the board 2 years to make that decision. From the initial recommendation, while we looked at all kinds of other alternatives, we waited for Appomattox to build their transfer station. We looked at different financing options, and we waited and waited and waited. And so by the time the board finally decided to go forward with it and let the contract, we were really up against the gun. And it was at that point that we said, you know, if we can get this thing done by November of '21, it'll be close to a miracle. There's no time for rain days. There's no time for a hurricane. There's no time for any glitches of any kind. Let's look at ways to buy ourselves time. So that slide presentation that you have there, Mr. Pugh, is what was presented in a gathering of the staff. Finance, Public Works, the deputy our engineers, DEQ, or not DEQ, the engineers at the time, were all, and this is what we discussed to decide whether we should go forward with the process to seek permission to uncap the unused portion of the landfill in order to buy that time. And so, how fortunate that it has saved us money. How fortunate that we had better data at the time that we looked at it. And the data would be different if we looked at it today, because costs are different today, they'll be different next year.
It would be even worse. It would be even worse at this point.
Perhaps, or perhaps better. You know, one can always speculate. The initial study was done to compare apples to apples, and so we tried to reduce all costs known at the time to transfer station versus landfill based on a per ton rate, okay? So if the cost of fuel goes up, well, it goes up for the landfill as well as it goes up for the transfer station. You're correct that the transfer station uses a higher proportion of fuel, but the costs for all go up. So if we compared everything given those numbers, you know, if we plugged in today's numbers to the same study, it should still come up with just about a $10 per ton difference. So the long-term solution was to switch from operating a landfill. And for us, The economies of scale in operating a landfill are from operating really large landfills, okay? And we don't have a really large landfill. And so there aren't economies of scale. We have to have all the same equipment that a large landfill would have that does a lot more tonnage than we do. We have a small landfill, we do a small amount of tonnage, and it costs a lot to operate that. So much so that it costs less to haul it to elsewhere. That's why the board decided to go with a transfer station.
May I stop you there? But that decision was made 3.5 months later, and you all decided that it was not feasible. You could actually save the county $1 million over 70 months. So we decided not to haul at that point in time. So it's kind of a contradiction of what you're saying.
No, I disagree. It was, the reason for for uncapping it was, as he said, you'd already paid for this capper thing. You had space left. To me, it would have been completely irresponsible not to have used the space that was already there. And I've got a couple of questions that I wanted to say, but Mr. Peel, I'll wait till after.
And to further address that, Mr. B, we just didn't know when the landfill would be full. So we didn't stop the transfer station to save $1 million while we continued to use the landfill.
Well,
We continue to use the landfill because we have to continue to use the landfill until it's ready to be capped, and we don't know when that is.
I understand, but
And, and just one other time factor in this was the bond money. There are time limits that the bank puts on us on when we have to spend the money. And so we can't dawdle in that. We have to spend it according to the schedule that we gave them.
Wasn't there a part of that to where we would have had to pay a penalty on that money, or we would not have gotten all of the bond money that we had requested?
Is there a penalty? I don't believe that there was.
Possibly.
Could have been.
Could have been.
Arbitrage is always calculated, and we won't know that penalty for years, because they will continue to calculate that for many years.
Right.
I guess
And we were also playing with our financial reputation.
I certainly think it would have been a great idea for the administrator to bring that information back to this board and present it to us so we could see that. It wasn't done at that time. We missed the boat on that, but anyway.
Mr. Chair, I just have two questions. So when was the contract let for the transfer station? When did we sign that?
I don't have that off the top of my head. That's in your materials, but I don't have that off the top of my head. Construction began in January of '21, so we probably would have signed it in the fall,
I think it was November, I can't remember.
October, November in the fall.
Is chronological.
So October, November of '21?
Yes.
All right.
So by
And-
February of '21 is when I brought to you all the effort to uncap.
And we voted to move to a transfer station in February of 2020?
January of '20.
Yeah, I remember that. That was one of my first and hardest decisions to make. Okay. And when was the board told that we were uncapping the landfill?
We were told we were exploring it on February 16th of '21. I mean, we still had to get studies for DEQ, we had to get DEQ approval, we didn't know whether it would be possible or not. We were pursuing it. So before it happened, it was brought to you.
So January of 2020, we said, okay, we're going to move towards transferring trash. 3 months later, there was a report done that said you should uncap the landfill. We signed a contract in October or November to build it. I'm not saying we would have, I'm not saying we wouldn't have, but if the board had known, would we have gone forward with building the transfer station so quickly? I don't know. So, I mean, I guess I'm just asking that maybe if we knew we were going to uncap it 3 months after we said we were going to build the transfer station, it would have been nice to know that earlier. So,
Well, we didn't think it was necessary.
no, we didn't know.
I'm not going to.
I heard him talk at your meetings
No.
about uncapping.
We didn't know until,
He just said February of '21, he told us. they knew that they were going to uncap it in 3 months after we voted to do it, which would have been March.
3 months after you voted to do it, we realized we were running out of time and we needed to begin preparing. So we held a meeting. I gave the approval based on that to begin pursuing it with the engineers to study it, to pursue it with DEQ to study it, to be prepared in case we couldn't finish by November of '21. We didn't know whether it was possible. When we learned that it was possible, I brought that to the board. Now, I didn't seek your approval. There was no vote. But you were given, it's in the minutes, and I have actually transcribed that meeting, so you can see the questions that you asked. Now, as you say, hindsight is 20/20. We now know that the landfill is going to last a lot longer, but at the time, we did not know that. And you were trying to prepare for the demise of the landfill and decided that you wanted a transfer station. I suppose and it's not a matter of, well, let's wait till the last minute before we start the transfer station or before we know the landfill is going to be full. We still don't know when the landfill is going to be full or not. But you had obtained the funding already. You had decided to go forward with the transfer station, and we were making it possible for that to occur. I fail to see what different result. We're in a very good position now because we thought to do that and have that ready.
Yeah, I guess my thought is, and, I'm not sure where I'm at on this, but I think the decision to build the transfer center was based on the landfill reaching capacity in November of 2021.
That is correct.
Had we known that the landfill capacity might last until 2024 or longer, maybe we would have decided not to build the transfer center. I think we were kind of pushed into, we based our decision on the best information we had at the time. I think it would have been nice if 3 months later, we would have known that maybe there was additional capacity. But I'm not sure we can do anything about that right now.
It's also worth remembering that there was momentum here. You had borrowed the money
Sure.
to dig the new cell in 2017. And that money had to be spent within 3 years. Okay, so we were running out of time on that. So we went and we refinanced that and found, so there had always been a plan to build a new cell.
You're off by a year. We let the contract in November of 2019,
Okay.
so the decision.
Well, that's in their chart, right?
Yeah.
That's on their chart.
But that's, well, he was asking the dates, we were
Okay.
off by a whole year.
All right. But my point is, you had already decided to build, in fact, no one had decided to build the new cell. That decision had never been made. It was an assumption that staff made, that when we went to get the financing for the schools, oh, by the way, staff realized, we need an extra $4 million because our cell is nearing the end of its life. According to DEQ, according to the engineers, we needed to have an extra $4 million. So we borrowed $4 million. We used the school's money. Then it was time to focus on the landfill. And we looked at it and said, well, do we really want to spend $4 million and be committed for 30 years? That's when we began looking at that. That's when the board took a couple of years to decide that question. So it just had a momentum of its own.
I think part of the problem, and I struggled with this when we voted on it to begin with, but the problem with shipping the trash is we don't control tipping fees and we don't control cost of fuel, transportation and all that, right? So I guess what we need to keep a very close eye on, I would recommend, is capacity of the cell that's open, right? And then as we move towards that, I mean, this might be an ongoing kind of evaluation. Is it, I mean, this might be blasphemy, but, I mean, would it be cheaper just to do another cell than to ship the trash? I don't know. I think that's kind of up in the air. Nobody knows where fuel costs are going. Nobody knows how much Amelia or whoever is going to charge us to bring it there. I just don't know. I mean, okay, we spent $4 million for a transfer station. It sounds like we're getting use out of it, right? I mean, or we will be in the next month or so. I mean, the equipment we're getting use out of, right? But we've got to keep a close eye on that, I would think.
Well, those are excellent points, and they've been raised from the beginning, and one of the things we had to confirm was, can we reopen another cell? And in fact, we cited the transfer station 2 cells over, so that should we need to open another cell, we can still do that, and it's still allowed under our permit. And let me assure you, we continue to look at everything. I mean, we've looked at doing our own janitorial costs. We looked at the cost of recycling. We continue to relook at everything, and we'll do that. One of the reasons why we've purchased our own hauling vehicle fleet is because when we looked at that, given the prices and given the financing that you all obtained for the county, it would be cheaper for us to haul rather than to pay someone else to do the same thing plus their profit margin. That could change over time. The liabilities could be such that it costs us more, and we have no problem with contracting that out. The thing that we cannot contract out is the operation of the transfer station itself, because that is tax-exempt funding that has to stay at public use. We can't contract out somebody else pushing the trash into the trucks. But all the other pieces, we'll have to check on that. I'm not sure about the use of the trucks that we bought with bond funds. But yes, sir, we'll look at all of that continuously.
So I'm sorry, just humor me a little bit. So right now, the transfer station is not complete, or it is?
It's substantially complete, and they're working the punch list.
Okay, so it will be ready very soon.
Yes, sir.
So when the trash is brought in from the
Haulers.
convenience centers or whoever, where are they just taking it up to the top of the cell and dumping it?
We will invite them to do that, and the professional haulers will do that, but we'll take everybody else's onto the tipping floor of the transfer station, and we get to use this as a nice warm-up training period for our staff and our equipment to break it all in as we learn to push trash into trucks, and we'll drive those trucks to the top of the landfill and empty them there. So we'll be doing both. We'll be doing both.
Okay, so, yeah.
I would like to echo what Mr. Marks said. I think it does need to be looked at very closely as we enter into this next stage with the cost to reopen that cell and versus what it's going to cost to haul. It's 75 miles at this point, one way to Amelia and 75 miles back. And with diesel at $5 a gallon plus, it's obviously at this point cheaper. In my opinion, my little bit of knowledge that I have of trucking costs to keep it here in the county. But it needs to be evaluated, and you need to keep us as a board abreast of these decisions going forward.
I'll continue to do so. Yes, sir. Both of those
Personally, I
things.
want to say, I think you made the right decision to uncap, so I
Thank you.
don't think any of us question that, so thank you for having that backup plan
Sure.
ready.
Now can I say my piece?
I thought I'm sorry.
I was talking to the chairman, not you. So, just good public policy, if someone was tuning in on YouTube and they watched this, they would have no idea of the deliberative process that this board went through to get to where we were. They would think, with the questions asked and public comment in the past, that we just kind of sat together, the 5 of us living here in Amherst County, and came up with this grand scheme. And nothing could be further from the truth. And I had concerns about this thing through the whole process, because I'm not an engineer, and there's a lot about, but we got in the best experts that we could possibly get. And they talked to us, we asked them questions ad nauseum over and over and over. And that process went on for 2 years. And we made the best decision we could, as Mr. Martin said, with the information we had at the time. It's very easy to sit back after several years and say, well, you should have done this, that, and the other. And then we had bond deadlines. We had financial implications there. But the other thing that hasn't been mentioned is at the time, DEQ was on our heels for a number of infractions. Thankfully, Mr. Lockaby helped to mitigate many of those. And because of the liability that we had in owning that landfill, that was another consideration. It was a strong consideration, and I supported it. Anyway, I just want to say that I'm very, very confident in the process, and I'm so confident in the decisions that we made as a board. Thank you.
All right. All right, we will move on to Board, Commission, Committee, Central Virginia Alcohol Safety Action Program Board. Mr. Rogers, do you have any information on that?
Just that Mr. Kelvin Brown's term will expire at the end of this month. He submitted his letter of interest to continue with his reappointment, or to be reappointed, and there is no other letters of interest received from the public despite our advertising.
Board, what's your pleasure?
I make a motion that we reappoint Mr. Kelvin Brown.
Motion on the floor by Mrs. Tucker. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And next we have Planning Commission. We have a vacancy on the Planning Commission, and we did have one applicant, which was Mr. Michael Bryant, who is currently serving on the board. He's done a good job. He has a background in engineering, and he is definitely interested in the Planning Commission and is at all the board meetings. He's done an excellent job. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and make a motion. We reappoint Mr. Michael Bryant to the Amherst County Planning Commission. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, Mr. Lockaby, do you have anything for us today?
I don't, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
All right. Next, we have the liaison and committee reports. Mr. Wade, do you have anything on the Planning District Commission meeting?
So for both of these, the Planning District Commission and Transportation Planning Organization, Mr. Rogers has been kind enough to put his reports in there, but the big ticket items there is both committees move forward with a program for U.S. Department of Transportation, Safe Streets and Roads for All. So it'll provide potential funding up to, I want to say, $1.5 billion for the area, for the region, to fix roads and whatnot. One caveat though there is you have to develop a safety plan, and that ties into looking at showing a equitable or racial tie to how roads are unsafe in order to get fixed. So take that into consideration there. Another item is Mr. Rogers was elected to serve on the executive committee for the local region here. So congratulations there. But that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. Any questions for Mr. Wade? All right, we'll move on. Treasury report, if there's any questions, that's just information only. And then if there's no questions, we'll move on to citizen comments.
We had a joint meeting of the school board and board of supervisors.
I'm sorry,
I didn't.
it's not on the agenda. Mrs. Tucker?
Okay, yeah, we had a joint meeting of the school board and the board of supervisors. I was there along with Mr. Wade and Mr. Rogers. What?
Oh, it's not on the agenda.
Huh?
I didn't put it on the agenda, I'm sorry.
Well, I can wait till next time.
Go ahead.
Anyway, just briefly, I met Dr. Wells. We know that there'll be an increase in the request for appropriation. We discussed new ways that they're looking at CRT, issues of equity and diversity, and they talked to us about their plans for school safety.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Tucker. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Rogers?
No, sir.
All right. Now we will move on to citizen comments. Anybody wishing to speak? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close citizen comments and move on to matters from members of the board. Mr. Wade?
Yeah, I just have one thing. I just want to congratulate the Madison Heights Dixie boys baseball and girls softball teams. They just recently competed in the World Series down in Alabama. So they didn't win, but they were down there representing the area and the state. So congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations to them. That's good for the kids to get out and see something different and compete. Mrs. Tucker, do you have anything?
I don't have anything, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes, I had some comments about the Coolwell Convenience Center and the gates that have been put up there. One, as you go right off of Coolwell, used to be a cable or chain across there for many years, and obviously gates appear to have been removed from somewhere else and put there, and basically what they've done is restricted where it was a two-lane travel down to one lane. And I know on Saturday morning when I was there was traffic trying to get out of the convenience center, and the traffic was lined up back into Coolwell Road trying to get off the road in there because two vehicles can't pass between those posts that are there. Is it, anyway, Mr. Rogers, we can probably look at that and get those posts moved back to where the width of the road is the width of the road?
I was just there this morning, Mr. Ayers, and I see what you're talking about, and so we'll take a look at that.
Yeah,
I
'cause
think
I
it's a
was-
matter of what size gates we can get, though.
Exactly. Those posts just need to be moved back to the side so you have the full use of the roadway and not restricting the
I
traffic.
get it. Yes, sir.
And the other thing was, I sent all of you all a letter that Mr. Markham called me yesterday regarding potential development in Mr. Wade's district in Madison Heights, and evidently the investor that's looking at this is investing a substantial amount of money, but obviously there needs to be some sewer water infrastructure in place in order for this development to come to fruition. And I know we appropriated some money toward that, but due to obviously the inflation and several other issues Mr. Hopkins is very much aware of, his question to me is, do we need to keep spending money doing what we're going to do, or what is going to be the status of the infrastructure? Obviously, the infrastructure is not just in place to serve this particular tract of property that's being looked at as invested by this gentleman out of Northern Virginia, but that was a question they had to me, so I reckon we as a board need to, I think he's supposed to go before the Planning Commission on the 18th, but if water sewer infrastructure is not going to be in place, or it's cost prohibitive to do it, does he need to continue to look at his plan of investing in our county? So, what's your thoughts?
Well, we discussed this at the Amherst, actually, Chair, if you would like to speak on it, but we discussed this at the Amherst County Service Authority Board meeting, and Mr. Hopkins had laid out the information that he had and the cost far out exceeds what had been appropriated. So it's quite a bit short. There was no consensus. We didn't discuss it much. I'd actually like to have Mr. Hopkins, if he doesn't mind, just come up here and address the board and just give some background on the project and give us your thoughts.
Okay, I don't know exactly what you want to hear, but Mr. Morgan's property has been up for development for decades. I mean, I remember talking with Dan about that project, about finding some way to get sewer down there when I was with Hurt and Profit back in the early 2000s. Mr. Morgan came to me, I guess it was a year or two ago, and, well, actually, I take that back. That was the last time he came to me, or when we came up with a way to do this. But I talked with Mrs. Morcom, I talked to Terry a couple times before that, but about 2 years ago, he came to me and we talked about it again, and I started looking at it in more detail and got with Hurt and Profit, and we figured out what we thought was a way to do it. And so at that point, I started talking to Mr. Rogers, we talked to the board, the ARPA money was appropriated, and we started looking at ways to do this. Now, we started with one plan, putting the pump station in one area. Of course, we're in this. At that time, we're not looking at just. Well, first, let me go back. We weren't looking at the development. The developable properties were, of course, a big part of this. But the only way the county could use the ARPA money for this was for replacement of existing infrastructure. And we had a wastewater system in the area that had been there for 20 years and was starting to go bad. And so we used that as a reason, as the cause for being able to use the ARPA money. But we also wanted to go back and size it to be able to handle all these developable properties. There are 4 or 5 down there, as I remember. And so, and since all that, we got the money. We have actually had Hurt and Profit do a geotechnical study. I mean, the rock is a real big issue down there. It took a while to figure out where the rock was and what we could actually do with it. When we found out, we had to revise our original plan as to where we were going to put the pump station, where we were going to put the sewers. We think we have a feasible plan right now. The biggest, and we've talked with property owners down there about getting, and they're very willing to discuss giving up or selling property or leasing property for the pump station. But the issue is funding. We've got $1 million from the county. The Service Authority doesn't really have much of anything we can put into it. Now, when Hurt and Profit did their original estimate for a pump station a year or so ago, it was, if I remember, I don't have it, the number $1.7 million sticks in my head. I don't remember, I know it was a lot more than $1 million. So we know that there's going to be more funding that's going to be required. Now, when I first talked to Mr. Morcom about this a year or so ago, I told him that, there's no way the Service Authority is going to have any money to put into this. We've got $1 million from the county. That's probably not going to be sufficient. And so what we're going to be looking at doing is, if we can find grants somewhere, we can do that. But I told him we're probably going to be looking at all the developers, the owners of the developable properties. You all are going to have to chip in. I mean, you got to pay to play. And he didn't say anything about that. But I think that's where we are right now. We're going to have to find more funding somewhere. And until we find it, I mean, I'm reluctant to go a lot further into, I mean, we're going to continue to go with the planning, but I'm kind of reluctant to actually start, get a proposal and start the design process until we know we have the money, we know we have a feasible project, and I guess that's pretty much where we are. And part of the problem with the design is we need to get with the developers and see what they're planning. I mean, right now, we have no idea what size pump station is going to be needed down there except for handling the dozen or so homes that are on the existing wastewater system that we want to replace. We've got the one project from Mr. Morcom that's been proposed. It's very preliminary. It's a sizable project. It's going to need a sizable pump station, but you're looking at 3 or 4 other properties that may be doing something similar. And until we have the information about what those developers might be intending, what we certainly don't want to do is go through and design a pump station and put it in there without getting their input and then find out it's not big enough and these other developers can't, there's no capacity for it. So we're still in kind of a planning process, and until we find the money and we get the rest of this information, we're kind of stuck. We're going to keep looking at planning what we're looking at, the project that is feasible, but there is certain information that we're not going to be able to finalize until we have the money, until we have this other information. Now, in my letter to Mr. Morcom, I told him this looks to me like I'm cautiously optimistic that this can happen. I told him that I think we could, if we had enough information, we could probably just start the design this winter, get it done this winter, start construction in the spring, and be done by the end of next year or sometime next year. But I told him, as an engineer, if I was your engineer, to be conservative, I'd say I would plan for the end of 2024, just to be safe. And that's the information I've given to Mr. Morcom.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
so in just listening to you, we know that 20 years ago, developers were looking at this and they couldn't do it because there's no water and sewer. And then we've had developers before Morcom, they went on down the road because no water, no sewer. Mr. Morcom comes not only with an idea, but an investor, an aggressive investor, same thing, no water, no sewer. There's a pattern here. I mean, I don't know how we break this, but if Mr. Morcom moves forward with this project, have you contemplated how much revenue that will be to the Service Authority? That'd be a lot of money coming into the Service Authority.
Yes, ma'am, I would.
what do we need to do to break this law? I just don't understand what we need to do to break this logjam. We're not moving forward, and it's the same old circular argument.
Well, I would disagree that we're not moving forward. We've done a lot of preliminary investigations. I've got tentative agreements with property owners to sell us land for the pump stations. We've got a preliminary plan laid out. So we have a preliminary design that's done. But until we know more information about what's going on with the other properties down there, so we know how to size the pump station properly, and until we know where the money's coming from, I think it would be a bad idea to keep pouring our money into this when we don't know, when we don't really have a solid plan going forward.
But it's a chicken and an egg. I mean, they're not willing to move forward and invest their money because they can't get any good information from the county. I don't blame them a bit. And you say, well, you don't want to move forward because there's certain information you don't have. Certainly. I mean, other counties figure this stuff out. Why can't we?
Well, we can figure it out, but I mean, you know, the county's throwing $1 million at this potential project. That's not small change by no means. So to say that we're not doing anything, I don't think is a true statement. You know, the crux of the matter is where's the other $700,000, $600,000 going to come from? Is it going to come from the taxpayers? Is it come from the unobligated reserve? Where is it going to come from? Is it coming from the development? I don't know that question. I am not going to spend $700,000 to do this, you know, unless they have some type of skin in the game.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
what Ms. Tucker was saying a minute ago, obviously, back before my time, there was interest in this property along 210 for development, and the infrastructure not being in place prohibited that from being considered. I had a gentleman back here probably 2 to 3 years ago, don't mind calling his name, Mr. Les Irvin. Most of us know Les. He's a very conservative gentleman in this county. Spent the biggest part of his life here. In his very words to me, he said, Jimmy, you all need to look at getting some infrastructure on 210 from downtown up into Madison Heights. He said that is a piece of property that is going to be looked at for investment, and this was just out of the blue. And I've always respected Mr. Irvin's very conservative comments, and when we think about the proximity of this property to downtown Lynchburg with what's going on there, it is in the place, if growth is going to jump that river, that's where it's going to jump to, would be up that corridor of 210 right there. And, you know, when we look at the expansion of infrastructure in this county, it's been probably a good while. We've done a lot with updating and whatnot and replacing a lot of infrastructure, but what have we done as far as expansion? And Mr. Rogers, is there alternative funding we could look at through programs that would help us to do this? And I mean, we're using $1 million for ARPA funding, which is, you know, that's not digging into our unobligated general fund. But is there alternative funding that we can look at as a locality that would help offset? This man is looking to spend millions of dollars in our community, because what I've seen in the conceptual drawing of this, by no means is it a small investment in our county. It's a significant investment.
Mr. Ayers, staff is happy to go pursue grants, pursue ARPA, pursue all the new infrastructure money. I think the first question, though, is how much if Mr. Morcom builds that thing out, it'll generate a lot of sales of water and sewer services, okay? A lot. That money will be used to finance $0.7 million. Now, for that $0.7 million, the Service Authority and the bank is going to get a $1.7 million project. Surely, the revenue will pay for itself. Surely, there will be enough revenue to fund that debt service. And we will still pursue grants. We will still pursue it. There is no reason not to go after this. It's a bird in hand, and we can crunch the numbers. We can talk to the banks. We can pursue the grants in advance. I just think, I agree that we ought to be moving forward.
I agree. We have got, I mean, I'm 100% behind alternative funding any way that we can do that. But for this gentleman who has no ties to this county at all, but likes the proximity, he's done some investing in downtown, and he likes, and he's purchased that property up there. I think we need to do our part in looking at the infrastructure expansion through that corridor right there, because there's been interest off and on through the years, and I think we've reached a point that we need to do that. And when you look at not only the connection that we'll see on the return is the properties this man's looking at building, the revenue based on taxes will be substantial as well. So I think we need to do what we can as a county to help facilitate so that this growth can take place.
You mentioned 3 other potential developers
There's
as well.
3 or 4 other big, fairly good-sized properties down there that I've heard rumors that the owners want to develop. Nothing concrete.
They haven't reached out to you or
No,
anything?
not specifically.
I'd like to say let's reach out to them and see where they're at and figure out what size, pump station we need to support them as well. In fact, it might just be worth specking out what size we need to capture all of it and then throw that back at us, just so we're aware how much that's going to cost, over and above what you've already planned.
Okay.
So.
Mr. Hopkins, Mr. Hopkins, are there alternative ways to sewer that property? Is there any different ways of doing it?
Nothing, well, again, starting with Dan for decades, and for me, the first 6 years I was here, but we couldn't come up with anything.
Okay.
I think that's the only way to do it.
So when was the last conversation you had with the developer, saw layout, number of units?
Mr. Morcom? I had to send him a status letter on the sewer, I guess about 2 weeks ago. He needed it for the rezoning application.
So you've seen his latest plan?
Yes, sir. Well, I don't know if it's the latest. I saw a plan several months ago. And maybe, you're right, it's a sizable project. I had a lot of questions and problems with some of it, but it was just a preliminary plan.
I guess what I would recommend, this is obviously a development that could be very important to the county and the service authority. I would suggest that Mr. Hopkins and Mr. Rogers and the EDA get together. I mean, if we're talking about a $700,000 shortfall, yeah, that's a lot of money, but let's put our heads together and see how we might be able to break that up a little bit.
Sure.
Right? Maybe the service authority comes up with some, maybe the EDA comes up with some, maybe the county comes up with a little bit more, but let's see maybe the developer pitches in. But let's see what we can do to kind of close that gap, right?
Yes, sir.
And-
Bob, thank you too, because I know you have been doing some preliminary work on that, so.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I think you may want to get with Mr. Bryant, wherever he went, and kind of look at those other properties and see what kind of density may go in there, and maybe that'll help you size the pump stations and things.
I'll get with him tomorrow.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins.
Anything else?
Appreciate it. Thank you,
Thank you,
Tom.
sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Martin, anything?
Yeah, I have a constituent on North Amherst Highway that's been having some problems with horses. I believe over 40 times recently, so I'm asking our county attorney and the county administrator to look and see if there's anything that and the county ordinances that we can do to help this person. If you can just get back with me, that would be great.
I'll get back with you after the meeting.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I have something. We need to do something. We have a, is it a homeless problem? I don't know. We have people camping on the side of 29 in Madison Heights, and it's been there for months. There may be more. I don't know. It's on private property. But I've been watching this and I haven't seen anything, and I've asked and I've heard there's nothing we can do. But if we're going to perception and so forth, it does us no good to have that kind of property sitting right on your main corridor into the county.
I was told by the owner that they now have squatter rights.
Did they what?
They now have squatter rights.
Well, I don't think that's true. I think you gotta be on the land for years in order to.
That's what he was told by our,
So I would like something, some information brought back, something, we need to do something, because if you don't do something now, it will get worse and worse and worse. We've seen it in a lot of other places in this country, and so I would like some information brought back to us, what we can do, or if there's anything we can do.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chair, yes, the sheriff's office did tell the owner that they could not take action based on those squatters' rights. However, I got with the Commonwealth's attorney and the sheriff, and we learned that the owner can go to the magistrate and file a complaint and take action himself to have the individual removed. But it requires the owner to do that. Now, I shared that information with him immediately, told him how to do it, what it was he needed to do, and my sense was that he's going to be going so quickly now on the construction of his apartment buildings that that the heavy equipment will be there sooner than he needs to get the guy moved off. So we found a way for the owner to solve that problem, and without the sheriff to be able to act more quickly, I don't know what staff can do at this point.
it goes, yeah, okay, so on one side, yeah, we've got commercial property, we've got tents on it, this and that. The other human side and the social side of that is we've got individuals with no housing, is there something our social services can reach out to them, so on and so forth?
I'll confer with them.
Thank you, sir.
That's all I have. All right, we're going to go ahead and go into a closed session. I make a motion, we go into closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia, 1950, as amended, to evaluate the performance of the county administrator. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.